Friday in October, the 18th today. You know that if you're listening live. You may be watching us, though, on Marshfield Media Access. In studio with me today for the first time that I can remember, and hopefully it'll be a regular guest here, is Wood County Board of Supervisors Chairman Doug Machon. Good morning.
Good morning, Jeff. Nice to be here.
Thank you for coming up. I appreciate it, and talking to us up here on the north side.
It's my pleasure. It's been a while since I've been in this studio, but I was here once before. We did an interview when I was the chairman of the UW Commission when we were building the STEM building.
Wow, that's been a while.
It has been.
We're still here.
Yes, I see that.
It looks a little different, but we're still here.
Studio is still the same size.
Yeah, if you're watching on TV, we can touch all the walls here almost on all four sides. So being that this is new for me, having you on the show here, give me a little bit of your background on County Board.
Well, this is my fourth term on the County Board, and I was elected the chairman at the start of my fourth term in April of 2018. And so since that time, I've been busy as chairman, went through two budgets, got a year under my belt, and there's a learning curve to the job, and it's been exciting, and it's nice to be a little more comfortable in the chair now.
Now, in order to be chairman, you have to be a member of the supervisors.
That's
so
correct.
What district do you represent?
I am a supervisor for District 12 in Wisconsin Rapids, which covers pretty much the downtown area. I live near Whitterfield, but I have basically most of the downtown. In fact, the courthouse is in my district. And then I have some little ancillary pieces that go out towards the airport.
How did you get involved in this? I hedge to call it politics. It is, of course.
Yeah,
but
it is politics.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. It's politics. But actually, I've pretty much been a pundit of politics ever since I was in high school, really. And I don't know, I think I was about 58 years old, I think is when at the time. And I just decided the time was right. I thought it's better I should probably put my money where my mouth is. I had ideas, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna run for county board. And I did. And here we are.
How long ago was that?
About 8 years ago. Almost 8 years ago.
The landscape of politics has changed in that time.
Oh, much. Very much so. Very much so.
I don't know how I encourage people to do this anymore.
I would not. Politics is a crappy business, and it can be. If you can leave egos and agenda at the door, sometimes you can get stuff done. But sometimes it's pretty hard.
Talking with Wood County Board Chairman Doug Machon here on today's Inside program. You can too, 384-2191, 384-2191, if there's something you would like to bring up to our attention here. There is plenty of business to be had at that level. How many supervisors are there?
19.
Well, that's
19.
plenty.
Yeah,
Can you get a consensus out of that?
Yeah, believe it or not, actually you can, depending on the issue. In fact, I think on Tuesday at our first nighttime county board meeting in quite a while was on Tuesday. We did an experimental run of a nighttime meeting in October, and we had unanimity on several of the resolutions that came before us. Of course, probably most of them would be rather pedestrian as far as most people would consider, but yeah, there are times when we get along pretty good.
And see, you say nighttime, and it just occurred to me that a lot of the city and county and local government is done at a time when most people of age are working.
That's true. And I think that maybe, there's a lot of factors to look at. When you talk about people getting involved in politics, it's, number one, a lot of it is, do I understand the protocol? Do I know what to do? What am I supposed to do? What are my challenges? What kind of problems will I have? Besides just trying to see if you can make the meetings and things like that. But understanding the issues, I know one of the probably the hardest things for new supervisors and maybe even ongoing supervisors is to understand governmental accounting and a budget. When you put together a budget for a county, you're talking millions and millions of dollars, and a lot
Pretty
of
soon
it.
You're talking real money.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this isn't chicken feed, but in a lot of the techniques, the accounting techniques are much different than private business.
And see, that's the thing that is you hear so much today. Be a businessman. Run it like a business.
Yeah.
And that's easy to say until the budget is laid in front of you, and you start adding up the numbers, and you go, "Well, wait a minute. Government is a losing business. That's why it's government run instead of privatized. A lot of it."
And that's absolutely. Excuse me, I got a bagel seed in my throat.
That happens.
Yeah. That's very, very well put. It's not always easy. I kind of lost that logic really quickly about running government like business, because I can tell you up front that on the accounting portion alone, it's very hard to do, because government accounting is you're dealing with a lot of federal dollars that passes through the state, comes to you as pass-through money, where the county just gets a grant from the state and has to disperse it or figure out a way to spend it with staying in the guidelines that the state or feds give you to spend that money. So that's a problem in itself at times. You're budgeting money that you may not have in hand. It's not like they write you a check on the first of the year and you say you have a government program that's going to give you $3 million from the federal government. It's not like they write you a check on the first of the year and here's your $3 million. You can put it in the bank and use it when you want it. No, you'll get it sporadically, and sometimes you'll get the final payment in November. And so you have to have your general fund, your cash reserves up to date so you can make payrolls and things like that until that money comes and passes through your budget and your operation. So there are a lot of things much, much different. And I don't know where there are businesses that necessarily publish every one of their employee salaries or that they're public information. We can have some of the highest paid members that work for the county. Their salaries are public information. I don't know that there's too many corporations that are going to necessarily tell you what their vice president of finance or what their HR person is making for salary. So there's a lot. Those are just small details that are different. But there's many things that are much more complicated than private business. It makes private business in many ways look pretty easy.
Talking with Wood County Board Chairman Doug Machon here on the Inside program on this third Friday of the month. Hopefully we're anticipating this will be a monthly visit here along with others. When we talk about with the mayor and on the city government,
Sure.
they've used the term the color of money. What they mean is you can't just spend whatever is in everything is a giant slush fund. Mm-hmm. Everything's accounted for,
Absolutely.
and that's what's hard to be able to find enough sand to put in the right pile from time to time, for lack of a better term.
Absolutely. We just put together a budget for 2020, and Wood County is going to have a budget of $119 million next year. That's a lot of money. When I first came on the county board, the first budget I took part in establishing for the county was $88 million. So we've grown $31 million in a short time. A lot of that is wages and benefits. We employ a lot of people. But we do other things. We provide a lot of services, and the budget continues to grow.
It's when you went from 88 to 119 now, it sounds like what, extravagance?
Hardly.
Are we getting better trucks? Are we getting
No, it's not extravagant. It's not extravagance at all. I think there's a couple of things. First of all, the cost of everything goes up continually. I mean, I'm not talking just wages and benefits, but everything costs. I mean, the cost of the oil that we use to make asphalt goes up. The cost of our supplies goes up. We have contracts we buy new vehicles. Those all costs go up. Insurance costs go up. So things progressively go up. The problem is, one of the big things that's changed between 88 and now for me is that we have to borrow. We bond to do our capital projects. We have to bond to do our highway projects and our capital improvement projects. We didn't have to do that at one time, but now the paradigm is, because of levy limits, that it's pretty common for us to borrow. Borrowing costs our taxpayers money because you have to pay back debt, and it costs you money because you're going to have to pay interest. So it's not like you've saved up the money and can take it out of your savings account anymore. There's no savings account there. You have to borrow to do those projects and then pay back. I think that in the long run that hurts taxpayers.
Was that what would be an unintended consequence? Because having that bond issue and having levies is an oversight. People say otherwise you guys are just on your own to do what you need to do with my money. Mm-hmm. So they put controls in, but these controls then are also costing money.
I would say that's a very good argument, and I would make that case. The fact is, levy limits have been too constrictive. I think a case could be made that they don't work the way they were intended. I think there's some good points to it. I think that as a check on the system, when you talk about extravagance, levy limits certainly prevent that extravagance. So they, to some degree, prevent wasting of taxpayers' money. But I think they can be stifling in a way as well. If you have capital projects that you need to address, and you have to borrow money for them, that's a cost that gets passed along.
Talking with Wood County Board Chairman Doug Machon. You can too, 384-2191, 384-2191 on the Inside program, Friday the 18th. You know that if you're listening live, but if you're watching us here on video, Marshfield Media Access is the place to get that. I think this will be on Channel 989 on the Spectrum Digital tier in the Marshfield area as well. And hopefully we will have a regular monthly chat here with the Wood County Board Chairman and talking about issues of the county, and we're right on the line here. You go across the street and we're on the other side. Town of McMillan is Spencer Marathon. Most of our listening area would even be probably in the outlying areas.
Yep.
But there are issues because our money still, do we get what we, there's been talk at times that we don't get what we, how would I say, are paying for here in the northern part of the state.
Yeah, I would tend to argue with that. Certainly not from my perspective. I think that I've never, that's another thing. When I first came on the board, I kept hearing about the Marshfield-Wisconsin Rapids divide. I never bought into that. I've never thought that way. When you look at, there's certain things that both areas do different. I mean, they're both our major population centers. Marshfield does things different than Rapids in many ways. They have different economic drivers, but I think from a county perspective, I've never thought any differently of Marshfield or Pittsville or Auburndale or any place else. I think as a county, I look at it from a very high level as a county perspective and what we do for all our residents across the county.
Now, you talked about budget. This is how many you've gone through now?
This will be my eighth. This is my
as a
eighth
supervisor.
One. As a supervisor,
and as a chairman.
As second.
So, what's the biggest hurdle?
The biggest hurdle? Well, we were lucky. We were fortunate this year that we had enough growth that we actually, the overall mill rate actually is going to drop next year. Because of our equalization, we had growth. That doesn't mean every township is going to have a drop in mill rate. It depends on their growth. But the fact is, from an overall standpoint, we dropped our mill rate. We kept our general fund in the neighborhood we wanted. We normally like to stay at 15%. That gives us enough cash reserves to deal with any type of emergency cash flow problems we would have. We're right there at 14.9. Overall, the budget's at 119, almost 120 million, 119,997. So we're close. We're pushing 120 million for an overall budget. I would say the biggest hurdle to get by probably is to, of course, to balance it. And so to balance it, you have to look at all the new requests. This year we got hit with some things that probably were a little bit unusual. We put in courthouse security. That had a big price tag. We had the sheriff's department budget was up $800,000. That's almost $1 million more. That's got added to your expense column. That's a lot of money. We got the additional assistant district attorneys. That's going to add approximately $300,000 to the budget. Not only that, but we're remodeling the third floor to make room for those people. We have to put staff in for those ADAs. The ADAs' salaries themselves are paid by the state, but we still have to staff them with legal secretaries and probably now receptionists, because you're talking about a fairly big, you're probably talking about a staff that's bigger than any law firm in the county. You're talking about 15 people working out of the DA's office now. I think that's probably would be the biggest law firm in Wood County that I'm aware of.
How did you account for that additional spending? I mean, I don't want my bill to go up. You tell me that we're doing okay, so how did we move the sand here?
Well, we got some increased revenues. The Evers administration gave us some extra money for roads, so that helped out. We got some help in the human services area from the new administration as well. So there was some money, and then we've got growth in equalization, property values. So we were able to levy for more. But so those are a few of the ways that we did things, and we cut some costs. We also cut some costs. We looked at it at a wellness program that we thought was probably costing us more than it should have. When we compared it to other counties and other municipalities that had the same type of offerings for their employees, we realized that we were a bit overboard on the cost of our program. We substantially, I think, reduced the cost of that program. And there was other areas. There's places where we consolidated jobs that were at a high level that saved us money, and in some cases eliminated some jobs that were open and we felt we didn't have to replace.
How much do you look around at what other counties are doing?
I think it depends on the issue. I think that when we looked at courthouse security, we did a lot of research with other counties to see what they were doing as far as logistically and what they were doing as far as cost as well. And I think that was mostly in the sheriff's domain, but the Judicial and Legislative Committee also did some research there. They did some traveling to other counties, get the lay of the land.
What was the necessity there? I mean, other than potential liabilities. I mean, now that it's been in for a month or so, the Wood County Courthouse has been wanded, and you're go through security on the way in. The amount of confiscation was maybe eye-opening for some people as to what we were getting, but yet there was no problem with that before. I mean, yet I don't know what's your thoughts?
Well, I mean, you're coming. Kind of going down the same road as I am. I agree. We pay a lot of money for liability insurance. You can make the case one way or the other.
Will that go down now that we've got security?
I couldn't answer that question, but I would doubt it. I would doubt it. Maybe it does. I haven't.
So we
really
gained an expense with no savings?
I don't know. I wouldn't be willing to argue that with you unless I had more facts. But I certainly can understand your point and somewhat agree to it. There's people that said we were going overboard with the courthouse security, that it wasn't necessary, maybe to the degree. I think a lot of it was driven by courthouse security measures coming from the courtrooms. And I think that many people would argue that if we secured the third floor at those courtrooms, we would have done enough. I'm not going down that road. The ship has sailed, basically, and the program was instituted by the proper committees and by the sheriff, and we have it, and now it's how do we make it work to the best that we can and make it as fiscally responsible as we can.
So the big hit came in the installation, and that's always the big time when now this is going to smooth out over a period of time as to pretty much salaries, or what are we?
Well, yes, I certainly hope so, but I can tell you what, last year we had a plan. We had basically a 2-year plan that we had thought we put into place last year with the CIP plan. We bought the equipment for 2019. So we bought the scanner, the metal detectors, and all that hardware for the front door. The plan was to institute the security on the first of the year in 2020. Well, that changed. People wanted to push it forward faster, and so we we actually did some budget rearranging and started the institution of the security scanning at the 1st of October, around the 1st of October.
You call it budget rearranging, and my ears perk up. I'm like,
budget resolutions, yes. We took some money. We took some money from places I wasn't necessarily happy with. I can tell you that.
Well, there you go, and that's just it. I mean, who does? Who's going to lose so somebody else can make up the difference here? Is what you're in that government.
Again, political agendas, and everything's politics. Everything can be politics, and certainly an issue like courthouse security, you can turn into politics real quick. But so we did some borrowing. We actually borrowed some money from the general fund to make it happen this year. And
well, you've got 19 people on the county board and 2 population centers on either border, and a lot of people in between who are trying to justify to their people as well what we're going to do for these population centers. And that's got to be a tough sell sometimes.
Good segue for me, because that comes to, if you don't mind, I'll jump tracks here a little bit, because that brings me to economic development from a county perspective. One of the things that I'm really pressing, that one things that we initiated differently, I didn't feel like the economic development from the county perspective was doing what I thought it should be doing. I wasn't sure that the county should be in the economic development game. So I brought together a few department heads and we talked about it. And we decided to task the SEED committee, which is partially economic development, to take up the topic and see what they thought we could do better, what we could do differently. And the first question I asked them to ask was, do we belong in the business? Personally, I think we do, to a degree. What degree, I don't know, but I think we do. The county does belong in the economic development game somewhat. Certainly your economic base drives everything from a budgetary perspective when you look at it from a county standpoint. So yeah, that question was answered, yes. And then the question became, what do we do differently? So one of the first things we did is we realized that, when I say we, I'm talking about the SEED committee. They realized that they needed some help. We weren't going to do it with a bunch of supervisors that aren't economists. So we needed to have some technical expertise. So we applied for a USDA federal grant called a READY grant, and it's for rural economic development activity, which is exactly what we are and what we're trying to do. We didn't really think we had a chance at getting that grant, but lo and behold, we got the grant. And so we are looking at some heavy hitters coming in starting in December to meet with a group of people made up of a lot of our traditional partners, some chamber people, some foundation people, some government people, and they are going to put together a steering committee. And these are 3 universities that are working with us with the READY grant. And so University of Wisconsin, University of Kentucky, and University of Purdue. And so they're going to look at the whole gamut as far as economic development, what we need to do, what we need to accomplish, and then how we do it. And they're going to also identify some sources of money for us for grants so that we can accomplish some of these things. I'm really excited about it. I think our partners are excited about it too. We also decided in the budget to join a group called the North Central Regional Planning Commission, which is kind of does the same thing from a regional perspective. And let me just touch on, if you're going to do economic development today, Marshfield gets economic development pretty good. You guys do it pretty good up here. You really do. And I've always admired that. Rapids does it a little bit different. I'm not going to say they do it worse or better, but they do it differently. But today, the paradigm for economic development is if you're going to be successful at any kind of economic development, especially from a county perspective, you have to take a regional approach. There are too many symbiotic relationships business-wise out there that if you don't combine them properly, your economic development program is probably going to fail. Your philosophy is going to fail. So you have to make sure that all those people are engaged on a regional level. And so that's what the North Central Regional Planning Commission does for us, along with the READY people. They're going to be taking a very close look at that rural regional approach. There's a lot of businesses that might be in Pittsfield that can gain something from either Marshfield or from Wisconsin Rapids. We're going to have to identify those symbiotic things and bring them together and make them work. And I think that's exciting. I think it's a new approach. It's rather than the Marshfield Chamber of Commerce doing what Scott Larson does up here very, very well and doing it one way, and Wisconsin Rapids does something entirely different, has a different philosophy. If we do it regionally, I think we'll be much more effective. And I think from what I'm hearing from our partners is they believe that too, and they're just as excited about it as we are.
Well, you've got 2 population centers with different basis.
Absolutely.
Totally.
Absolutely.
And you've got a lot of people in between who are also a part of that. And when I think about, the map is the only place there's a line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't step over a line going across the street here that says I'm now in Marathon County.
Absolutely.
So it's all part. We're all part of this. And when people look at this, they want to see where's shovel ready. What's my tax base? They're doing their homework.
Absolutely. And you hit a very good point when you talk about the line, and you talked about your proximity to Marathon County. How many people from Stratford donate to the Wood County tax base just on their sales tax alone by coming to Marshfield and shopping? I mean, people in Stratford and Spencer, they're shopping in Marshfield, so they're contributing to Wood County. So that kind of gives some credence to the regional concept. There are no boundaries when it comes to money.
The other thing for economic development, by the way, talking with Doug Machon, he's the county board supervisor here for Wood County on the Insight program this third Friday in the month. Hopefully we can make it a monthly visit. But when you talk about economic development for the county, you don't have industrial parks. You have two things. You have retail and industrial, the way I see it. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, everything's agricultural. Mm-hmm. So that's private land. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're not in the business as government here of owning land and without a reason that you're going to have, if you're going to annex or do whatever. But other than frac sand, I mean, what are we talking about here on economic development for rural areas?
Another good segue. Thank you, Jeff. You're hitting them all right in the head this morning. But it takes me to what's proposed in the town of Saratoga, which is that utility scale solar array down there, 150 megawatt solar array. The fiscal impact to the county on that solar array from the state utility fund is $350,000 a year. And the impact to the township is $250,000 a year. I don't know that there's any town in Wood County that's going to say, no thanks, we really don't want that $250,000. That's a pretty good slice of a township budget. And from the county's perspective, we'll take the $350,000. That's kind of we're being handed one there as far as I'm concerned. No additional infrastructure. We don't have to run sewer lines to a solar array. We don't have to put extra people on the fire department. We don't have to even think about that kind of stuff. This is a solar array that they're going to come in and hopefully build, and it's going to stand there and produce electricity. It's basically like getting a power plant in the county, and that's how the funding comes back from the state, because they're looking at it 150 megawatts. That's enough power to annually power 40,000 homes. So you're talking about a substantial production of electricity there. And so the state says anything over 50 megawatts, we're going to take that land that development is on, and we're taking it off the tax rolls. You're not going to get property tax on it anymore, but in lieu of that, we're going to give you a cut of the state utility fund, which is comprised of money that comes in from licensing fees for power plant operations, whether they be coal, natural gas, nuclear, or solar.
That was my question, is whose land is it and who's the loser here? I mean, it's okay to build infrastructure on the land, but what's the land worth there?
Well, the land's going to be sold. Whoever's got the land is going to sell it. Is going to sell it to the developer. And I did some initial surveys when we first heard about this, and the difference in what we'll make up between the state utility fund payment, if we get it, if this all happens and transpires, and what we make on real estate taxes, it's a no-brainer. I mean, we're talking, small amounts of money. Most of the lands down there where it's proposed were in forest crop at a reduced tax rate to begin with, and they're going to we stand to gain $350,000 from the state. To me, that's a pretty good trade-off for Wood County.
How long are the contracts that you can count on this?
I think the initial contract would be for 30 years. We're talking about, I forget the number. I'm sorry I didn't bring the number with me, but I think we're in a neighborhood of somewhere north of $20 million or $20 or $30 million for over the lifetime of the. I mean, we're not talking about chump change here.
How are they going to divide this? Who's buying the power?
Well, that's the whole thing. I'm glad we're talking about it, because it gives me a chance to tell people in Marshfield what's happening down there. And what's happening now is there's a developer that's come in. The name of the company is Savion. They're out of Kansas City, and What they do is they develop these projects. They're in 23 states right now. They develop these utility scale projects. And what they basically do is they come in, acquire the land, or make arrangements to acquire the land, develop the proposed easements to get the power connected to a 138-volt line, transmission line. And so there's a number of things that have to be in place there. And one of the things they looked at is being able to buy a chunk of land that was contiguous from one buyer. It makes the whole process easier rather than buying a 40 from a guy here, 80 over here, and have 100 different buyers. They had a chance to buy a piece of land, and it was in close proximity to the right size transmission line. So they said, okay, let's proceed. So they've started the development. They've been very open about it with the townspeople of Saratoga. What they want to do is they want, first of all, address all the concerns that the residents of Saratoga have. They've been very good about that. They've been very forthright and said, everything's on the table. If you have a problem, we want to know about it. If you have a concern, we want to know about it, and we'll address them. One of the things that came up, I know, initially was line of sight. Well, the area that they've looked at has a natural border of trees around it. You're not even, people driving by, and I think the nearest road is a mile away, aren't even going to see the solar panels. So that's one question. But they're very meticulous about doing those things. They want this project to do well. They want to be a good neighbor. What they basically will do then is develop this project. They'll do all the environmental surveys, get all the initial paperwork, the applications in place, and basically de-risk it. And then they will sell it before it's built. They will not build it. They will sell it to somebody that's going to build it. Now, I think it's safe to assume that that buyer is probably going to be some large utility in the state. And that could be, there's a number of them. And you got Madison Gas and Electric, you got Alliant, you got We Energies. So it's most likely, and I don't know who they're going to sell to. I don't think anybody does right now. But the fact is, those utilities are shutting down coal-fired production plants and natural gas production plants right now, and they need to replace that electricity somewhere, and they're looking to solar to do that. Almost every one of those companies have established some type of long-term goals for their future production of electricity, and they need to meet those goals with solar or wind, and so that's why they're looking at this, and they really want to do this the right way.
So, talking with Doug Machon, he's the Wood County Board Chairman here on today's Insight program this third Friday in the month of October. You can call us 384-2191, 384-2191. So it sounds like we don't get the direct benefit of the power, but of the land use cost as far as Wood County citizens.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it, yeah.
So the power may go elsewhere, but that's okay. They're paying us the infrastructure cost.
The power is going to be put on the grid, and wherever that power gets sold is up to the utilities. But the county will still maintain the revenue from having that production facility within our boundaries, and the town of Saratoga as well.
And a 30-year contract, it sounds like.
It's
something we can count on.
Yeah, and I mean, realistically, Jeff, that those technologies are growing so quickly. I wouldn't limit it.
It's like a house, 30-year loan. Yeah. The chances of ever being there when it's paid off is slim.
Well, I think the technologies, if anything, it's probably going to get improved. I'm not saying one way or the other, but it could expand. The technologies in solar, and we're doing stuff on our own in the county. We've gone down that road in the county. We're establishing our first solar array on a facility at Nepco Lake, a shelter house that gets rented year round. We're going to put solar panels on there to demonstrate how we can offset our electrical expense in the county. That's exciting stuff. There's very few technologies that give a municipality, whether it be county, whether it be city, whether it be town, the opportunity to either substantially reduce expense or gain revenue. This technology does both. It does both for the county. I think we're going to prove that very shortly here. I always give the example that the courthouse alone, one of our major buildings, budgeted for electricity annually $180,000. Now, if we can offset that, and we're projecting an offset in our electrical cost at Nepco Lake of 40%, But and that's a small area, but it gets used year round. So it's a pretty good test facility because it's a small electric bill, but it gets rented out right through the winter months. So it's operating around the clock, or not around the clock, but around the year, throughout the year. If we can demonstrate that we can gain that offset in our electrical costs there at a small setting, extrapolate that data out to a building we're budgeting $180,000 a year to. What's 40% of $180,000? You're talking some serious money. Then you come up here and you talk about Norwood or a building like that. You look at your big centers in the county, Norwood, the Highway Department, River Block, Edgewater, big electrical expenses. So you're talking about doing some serious expense reduction if you want to, and if it plays out. I'm not going to say one way or the other. It's a small setting to try it. I think it will. I think it's been proven. Those technologies are growing so quickly that there's so many additional good reasons to do it, whether it be public health, whether it be workforce development, whether it be public safety. It adds something to all those elements.
Talking with Doug Machon, County Board Supervisor Chairman, here on the Insight program today on WDLB Radio. That's there's two things. One is it's the age-old question. Is it going to save me money or make me money? Mm-hmm. You know, when you come in front of the board or a government entity, you say, which one? You know, if it doesn't meet either criteria, you got a pretty tough sell.
Two real good questions. Two real good questions that I ask myself all the time.
And the other thing is, there have been people in the private sector who have tried this before and try to sell power back to the grid or whatever the case, and may or may not have worked out. But again, on the government scale that you're doing it here, you're comparing apples and oranges the way I see it.
In what way?
Well, in the fact that you've got a savings here of on a county level on a budget, as opposed to trying to sell back to an individual one at a time, small scale on a power grid.
I see that. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And you can go a step further, and I mean, you can really carry this out. And I think you may see that. I mean, there's a lot of our department heads. I know our Parks Director, Chad Schooley, is pretty excited about some of the opportunities that he sees could possibly happen. When you look at some outlying buildings, you could, and this is scary when people hear me say this, but because not everybody would agree with it, but you can take small buildings off the grid. I mean, the battery storage is developing so quickly. And what does that mean for safety? We learned a really good lesson. You guys were lucky in the July storm last year. You guys didn't get hit up here like Wisconsin Rapids did. But there were homes in my district that were without power for 5 days. Interesting things happened. I worked in the Emergency Operations Center for basically 5 days with our emergency management guy and his team, and other leaders from other municipalities that were hit hard by the storm, including the mayor of Wisconsin Rapids, Mayor Pittsville. And what happened is, as we went through the logistics of recovering from that storm, which was very catastrophic in Rapids, we had 900 trees down on power lines. It was 75 telephone poles snapped off. So you're talking about major outage. It was like a bomb went off in the city. Number one issue, when we hit the EOC the first time, number one issue, how do we get power to the hospital? We got to get power to the hospital right away, first, as fast as we can. Okay, then as soon as we got power to the hospital, okay, long-term nursing facilities, Edgewater, any long-term care facility, we got to get power to them. We got power to them. Third, got to get power to the Rapids water supply, so at least people have running water. We got to make sure the pumps are running for the water system. Okay, then day two and a half, people started to come that needed CPAPs charged. They needed drugs that had to be refrigerated. They didn't have a refrigerator running. Nobody has a landline anymore. They had cell phones and personal devices that needed to be charged. So we had to open up respite centers. We had to get power to places of community where people could come in to take care of those basic needs that had become critical due to the loss of power. So I began to ask myself as we went through that, if we had a solar power facility, solar powered facility, even on small scale, and I think Nepco Lake could be an example of that is solar powered, or either is solar powered with battery storage, and now the battery storage is up to like 3 days, I think, in some cases, and the batteries are much smaller. You can open up 5 minutes after storm, and you have those things available. You don't have to worry about reconstructing power lines. You don't have to worry about finding a generator, getting it in location, doing things like that. You're ready to go. Flip a switch, and we're open for business. If you need to refrigerate your drugs, here we are. If you need to do your CPAP, here we are. If you need to charge your phone, here we are. That becomes a quality of life, and there you go. There I spin it off again, but it becomes a quality of life thing, which is when you talk about economic development, you talk about making your community a place where people want to come and live. And if people see that kind of stuff, I think they're intrigued by it, and they're thinking, wow, those people got it together. They know what they're doing up there.
Talking with Wood County Board Chairman Doug Machon. You can too, 384-2191 here on the Insight program. On the 18th of October, I say that, you know if you're listening live, but you may be watching us in video here, channel 989 on your Spectrum Digital tier, or at Marshfield Media Access. You can see what we're talking about coming up. We'll talk more in a few moments. Don't go away. To the Inside program, or watching it here on AM 1450 WDLB. Today is Friday, the 18th of October. You know that if you're listening live, but I say that because you may be watching us on video here, talking with Wood County Board Chairman Doug Machon about business at hand here that affects, of course, the Wood County area, which the majority of Marshfield is in. And we've talked about budgets, and you throw some numbers around, and pretty soon you're talking $1 million here, $1 million there, and next thing you know, you're got some real money involved, you know?
Yeah.
So the old saying goes. But the people, you know, who aren't in the two population centers, I sometimes consider as being, I don't want to say left out, but there's not a lot happening out there. You know, I mean, they talk about what's going on in the city, and they're either up here or down there or whatever the case may be. And the people don't always feel like they're a part of what's happening if they're in the corners of the county here. So
I understand that. And before I address that, I got to tell you, when you're talking about, when you say $1 million here, $1 million there, and I always say taxes are not a good thing, but the programs those taxes pay for are. I don't know how reassuring that is to anyone, but that's no one likes taxes, but the programs that they buy are good. And back to the people outside the major population centers for Wood County, Marshfield, Wisconsin Rapids, of course. What comes to mind is two of those probably smaller areas that I think really have their act together are probably Grand Rapids and Pittsville. Pittsville's doing some great stuff out in Pittsville. I think Pittsville looks at economic development and see they're trying to do it, and with the help of Scott Larson from Marshfield Mackey, they're doing some good stuff there. But I think as we do the regional approach, it's going to really encompass more of those, the Auburndales, the Milladors, the Grand Rapids as well, Saratoga even. But I think we'll be looking at it from a much broader perspective, and I think that'll be much more effective. When you look at, to give you an example, one of the things that I always hear is we need housing. We need housing. We've got to get millennials, right? That's what you hear all the time. We've got to attract millennials. That's part of placemaking. That's part about making our county a place where people want to live. I think it's much more than what it used to be, and people that know me best have heard me say this before. Traditional placemaking. Traditional placemaking was about parks, water venues, bike paths, those types of things, nice amenities. I think it goes a little bit beyond that now. I think if you're going to do effective placemaking, it becomes much more than just those things. Not that those things aren't important and that they don't have a place, but I think the things that we talked about, resiliency from storms, philosophies, whether it be on housing or programs that deal with solar energy and resiliency, those types of things. I think that's part of it now as well. Do you want to invite businesses? Do you want to have rural broadband that's effective so that people can come in and start their businesses or run their businesses out of their homes? A lot of people do that now. So it becomes that becomes a place where people look at it and they say, you know what? They're thinking the same way I am. Maybe I need to go there, and maybe I need to take my business with me.
Talking with Doug Machon, Chairman of Wood County Board, here on today's Insight program on WDLB. We talked about the energy panels, and you said that's in Saratoga Township?
Yep.
and what that's going to mean for the Wood County budget. You have energy goals, you said?
Yeah. We actually, as part of as we walked into the solar technologies from a county perspective, one of the first things we did, well, number one of the first things we did was we established a renewables and sustainables fund of money, which we were going to use for projects that would be brought forward by our department heads that would be energy efficiencies or produce revenue or save expense. And so we established that fund of money, and out of that came some ideas for solar, which one of them was the NEPCO Lake. And so we also wanted to get designated by an organization called SolSmart. They're out of Washington, D.C. They're funded by the Federal Energy Commission, and they certify municipalities or counties according to their readiness for solar, and that doesn't mean anything more than making it bureaucratically easier for, if, like, say, Jeff, you want to put solar on your house, you can go to their website and find out exactly how you do it, and cut through the red tape. You know exactly what you got to do, what your setbacks are, any other logistical concerns you might have. That does it for private citizens as well as businesses. There's a lot of other things. Part of the SolSmart designation was the municipality or county had to have a listed goals, energy goals, and we established that on Tuesday night by coming together with a Wood County energy goals and plans, and so that kind of gives direction to where we want to go. There's another plan that's come out of the Renewables and Sustainables Committee as well, where they are looking at establishing a solar-powered electric vehicle charging station at the courthouse. And I don't know what you know about electric vehicles, but the price of electric vehicles very shortly here is going to be cheaper than internal combustion engine vehicles. And the maintenance costs are much less. The initial cost of that is less. They actually cost less money to produce in Detroit. They take up less space. The range on those vehicles is extending by the minute, basically. So there's another area that possibly we can save a lot of money on.
Why would county government want to get involved as opposed to a private entity in charging?
Number one, it's free. It'd be if it's solar. If it's a solar charging station, it's free. We produce that power for nothing. They did the same thing at Midstate, and so they're in the research stages of that. They're looking into it. Nothing's been decided yet, but if you look at the possibility of using an electric vehicle in the county, we have public health nurses that run back and forth in Marshfield. That's easily within the range of an electric vehicle. If you can buy an electric vehicle cheaper than you can buy a internal combustion motor vehicle, you eliminate the cost of fuel. You have a solar charging array at the courthouse that charges that vehicle for nothing. You've really cut a lot of expense. And I mean, I look at it strictly from a fiscal point. I won't argue anything else about it other than, hey, the bottom line looks pretty good on this stuff, and I'm all about the bottom line.
Well, it's good to have you here. I'm coming to an end. One thing that you brought up, though, that has been somewhat, I don't know if I'd say charged, but good discussion, something that you had on the county board level, the personal conviction resolution?
Yeah, we had that on, that has to do with childhood vaccines. And that I'd say charge was a good issue. The state's got some bills down there in Madison where they want to eliminate the personal conviction. That is just to make it very simple. That is, if you don't believe that your kid should be vaccinated, you can opt out. Wisconsin's probably a little bit behind other states. Other states have eliminated that already. Interesting conversation. That the resolution was to back the state bills which would eliminate the personal conviction. Still have medical exemptions if your child has some kind of an immunity deficiency or has a medical reason to not get vaccinated. Of course, the state doesn't make you vaccinate that child. There are religious exemptions as well. Personal conviction was just if you didn't believe in vaccines. That may or may not be dangerous. We've seen outbreaks of, and the point was made, of diseases that were always controlled before in areas that have eliminated that stuff. We all know that in childhood daycares and schools, that's a good area for infection from any type of bacteria as well as disease. And so you want to be careful. I had an interesting conversation, though, and that the resolution carried, by the way, and was in support of those state bills. But I had an interesting conversation afterwards with some people. And what was confusing for me was that there was a rather large coalition of people there. And then when they made their points in the argument, they were coming from different viewpoints. There was people that were arguing on the immune health issue of the personal convictions. There were people that were arguing on personal freedoms of the personal exemption. And then there were people that were arguing about big pharmaceutical money controlling government, that argument. And then there were also people that were arguing on the conspiracy that the Center for Disease Control was corrupt. So I was a bit confused on exactly what the issue was. So when I'm confused or on the fence, I go with the people that we pay the most to in our county government, and that's our public health nurse. And she said we need to back these, and so that's the way I voted, and I think that's the way the rest of the county board majority did.
This is a resolution.
Yeah,
so is there any enforcement teeth
absolutely.
behind this?
And that's the thing, Jeff. That's exactly the thing. The county's not going to own anything here. This is going to happen at the state level.
So why get involved or take your time?
That's a good question, and we ask ourselves that sometimes. Some of these resolutions that we put before these, or even referendums, you can carry it a step further to referendums, non-binding referendums. What good are they? I can see both points. I can argue both sides. There's no teeth in this dog at all. It's going to happen in Madison. But I did have a really interesting conversation with two women that spoke at the meeting. Actually, both of them. My wife and I ran into them afterwards at our local restaurant, and they were friendly enough to come up, and we had a really good discussion for about an hour. And they told me some things that I really wasn't aware of that I found very interesting. So. Well,
that's the one thing about being a representative, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to hear.
Yeah, I love talking to people, and I love it when people can make a good point and get my brain working and get me thinking. And they did that. They said that the bills that were presented in Madison weren't just about kids; they were also about adults. So that you and I would lose if we go to the hospital and the doctor says you really should get this shot, we can say no, I don't want that shot. And to me, that kind of strikes close to home, because I know every time I get a fish hook in my hand, I love to fish. They want to pump me full of tetanus. I said, I've had so many tetanus shots in my life, I don't want another one.
Talking with Wood County Board Chairman Doug Machon here today on the Inside program on this third Friday in the month, trying to make it a monthly visit here with you on AM 1450 WDLB, and also you can watch us on Marshfield Media Access. That comes in on 989 with your Spectrum Digital tier, or at marshfieldmediaaccess.org, or on their Facebook page. You can watch this as well. They will have the video posted. Thank you for coming up here and visiting with us.
Hey, my pleasure, Jeff. I look forward to our next one.
All right, here on AM 1450 WDLB's Inside program, I'm Jeff Canon.